visitation yesterday. I get all the good stuff. So we had visitation yesterday for worship. Today is the commemoration of Justin Martyr. Justin was martyred in 165 by being beheaded. And you got a question?
I just wanted to say I haven't seen you all since last month.
Okay. So, since yesterday was May and today is June, we get the good stuff. So Justin Martyr, born in 100 and converted to Christianity in 130, became a teacher in the church and was martyred in 165 by being beheaded along with a number of his students, and is remembered as Justin the Martyr because he was so willing to die for his faith in Christ. Probably among his writings there are several copies of the transcript of his trial that I will not bore you with this morning, but one of his most important writings is a description of early Christian worship that he wrote to the emperor. Pastors have probably all read this in seminary and worship class, and some of you may have run into it as well. But it is the most complete early description of Christian worship. And listen to this and think about how much it mirrors what we still do in traditional churches, in the mainline churches, for our pattern of worship. He writes, "On the day named after the sun, all, whether they live in the city or the countryside, are gathered together in unity. Then the records of the apostles and the writings of the prophets are read for as long as there is time. When the reader has concluded, the presider as a discourse admonishes and invites us into the pattern of these good things. Then we all stand together and offer prayer. Bread is set out together with wine and water. The presider likewise offers up prayer and thanksgiving as much as he can, and the people sing out their assent, saying the Amen. There is a distribution of the things over which thanks have been said, and each person participates. And these things are sent by the deacon to those who are not present. Those who are prosperous and who desire to do so give what they wish, according to each one's choice. And the collection is deposited with the presider. He also aids widows and orphans, those who are in want through disease or another cause, those who are in prison, and foreigners who are sojourning here. We hold this meeting on the day of the sun, since it is the first day on which God, having transformed darkness and matter, made the world. And on the same day, Jesus Christ, our Savior, rose from the dead." I would think that would sound familiar to all of you for what you will be doing tomorrow. Thought we would join in responsive prayer again. You should have a copy in front of you. Holy God, holy and mighty, holy and immortal, have mercy on us. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial, and deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. I believe in Jesus Christ, God's only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. He descended to the dead. On the third day he rose again. He ascended into heaven. He is seated at the right hand of the Father, and he will come to judge the living and the dead. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting. Amen. O Lord, I cry to you for help. In the morning my prayer comes before you. Let my mouth be full of your praise. And your glory all the day long. Every day will I bless you. And praise your name forever and ever. Awesome things will you show us in your righteousness, O God of our salvation.
O hope of all the ends of the earth, and of the seas that are far away.
Bless the Lord, O my soul.
And all that is within me, bless God's holy name.
You redeem my life from the grave.
And crown me with mercy and steadfast love.
Lord, hear my prayer.
And let my cry come before you.
The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious Lord, in every age you have sent men and women who have given their lives for the message of your love. Inspire us with the memory of those martyrs for the gospel, like your servant Justin, whose faithfulness led them in the way of the cross. And give us courage to bear full witness with our own lives to your Son's victory over sin and death. Through Jesus Christ our Lord.
Amen.
The readings for martyrs include Revelation chapter 6, beginning with verse 9. When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slaughtered for the word of God and for the testimony they had given. And they cried out with a loud voice, Sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long will it be before you judge and avenge our blood on the inhabitants of the earth? And they were each given a white robe and told to rest a little while longer, until the number would be complete, both of their fellow servants and of their brethren and sisters, who were soon to be killed as they themselves had been killed. Friends, the first reading. The gospel reading is from Mark chapter 8. Jesus called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, If anyone to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. Let us pray. We give thanks to you, Heavenly Father, through Jesus Christ, your dear Son, that you have protected us through the night from all harm and danger. We ask that you would protect us today from sin and all evil, so that our life and action may please you. Into your hands we commend ourselves, our bodies, our souls, this assembly, and all that is ours. Let your holy angels be with us, so that the wicked foe may have no power over us. Amen. Let us bless the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Almighty God, bless us, defend us from all evil, and bring us to everlasting life.
Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Spence. The agenda, which was up above you, it's already been brought to my attention that I failed to properly translate. I'm just fine from Latin into English, but apparently from military time into civilian time I failed. So in the one heading where it says 1300, that's actually 1 o'clock. Okay, so just note that. If you left your coffee mug and you're a quilter, come reclaim it sometime from the front desk. We have special orders. Always at first quorum. I need a report from the registration committee.
You shall have it. Pastor Jacqueline Campbell, still retired. The registration committee report, as of, Mr. Chair, as of 8:40 a.m. this day, those registered as attending this assembly are 75 lay voting members and 38 clergy voting members, for a total of 113 voting members. 11 visitors are also registered as attending. Thank you very much.
you to the Registration Committee. The chair declares a quorum present. We are open for business. We have special orders. First special orders of the day is the report of the Elections Committee. Diane Day, come forward, please.
All right. All right, lovely job balloting. Very well. Not problematic. Thank you to all those who helped count. Appreciate it, big time. So, the report of the first ballot is as follows. For the election to Synod Vice President, 106 total votes were cast, 106 of which were legal, with 54 being required for a majority to elect. Legal votes were as follows. 69, Paul Wangerin, 36, Nancy Weeks, 1, Andrea Brock. There were 0 illegal votes.
Paul Wangerin, receiving the necessary votes for election, is declared elected to the Synod Vice President for a 4-year term.
The report of the first ballot is as follows for the election to Synod Council, Ohio Kanawha Valley Conference Clergy. 104 total votes were cast, 104 of which were legal, with 53 being required for a majority to elect. Legal votes were as follows. 36, Carl Ames, 67, Emily Theobald Rollins, 1, Randy Richardson. There were 0 illegal votes.
Emily Theobald Rollins, receiving the necessary number to be elected to Synod Council, is elected Synod Council Ohio Kanawha Valley Conference for a 3-year term.
The report of the first ballot is as follows for the election to Synod Council Potomac Conference Clergy. 103 total votes were cast, 103 of which were legal, with 53 being required for a majority to elect. Legal votes were as follows. 46, Karen Erskine Valentine, 57, Jason Felici. There were 0 illegal votes.
Jason Felici, receiving the number necessary to be elected, is declared elected to Synod Council Potomac Conference Clergy seat for a 3-year term.
The report of the first ballot is as follows for the election to Synod Council, Upper Ohio Valley Conference Clergy. 106 total votes were cast, 106 of which were legal, with 54 being required for a majority to elect. Legal votes were as follows. 52 for Joel Richter, 54 for Jason Felici. There were 0 illegal votes.
That's not Jason Felici. Bill Ridenour. Was it Bill Ridenour? It was Bill Ridenour. So the correction is 52 votes for Joel Richter, 54 votes for Bill Ridenour. Bill Ridenour, receiving the necessary number for elections, declared elected to Synod Council of Upper Ohio Valley Conference Clergy seat for a 3-year term.
I'll take my money later, Bill. The report of the first ballot is as follows. For the election to Synod Council, Mon Valley Mountain Conference laity. 101 total votes were cast, 101 of which were legal, with 52 being required for a majority to elect. Legal votes were as follows. 34, Elda Bennett, 67, Debbie Morelli. There were 0 illegal votes.
Debbie Borelli, receiving the necessary number of votes for elected, is declared elected to the Synod Council Mon Valley Mountain Conference laity seat for a 3-year term.
The report of the first ballot is as follows for the election to Synod Council Potomac Conference laity. 99 total votes were cast, 99 of which were legal, with 51 being required for a majority to elect. Legal votes were as follows. 57 for William P. Tinkle, 42 Elizabeth Reaney. There were 0 illegal votes.
William Pete Hinkle, receiving the necessary number of votes for election, is declared elected to the Synod Council Potomac Conference laity seat for a 3-year term.
The report of the first ballot is as follows for the election to Synod Council at-large youth. 104 total votes were cast, 104 of which were legal, with 53 being required for a majority to elect. Legal votes were as follows: 34, Lauren Hasbargen, 17, McAllister Agnesi, 22, Sampson Rachel, 31, Spray Abigail. There were 0 illegal votes.
No candidate receiving the number necessary for election. The chair declares there is no election. Per our bylaws, the two receiving the most number of votes proceed on to a second ballot, those being Laura Harsbargen and Abigail Spray.
The report of the first ballot is as follows for the election to Synod Consultation Committee clergy. 105 total votes were cast, 104 of which were legal, with 53 being required for a majority to elect. Legal votes were as follows: 39, Jacqueline Campbell, 65, Jess Felici. There was 1 illegal vote, voting for a blank space.
Jess Felici, receiving the necessary number of votes for election, is declared elected to the Synod Consultation Committee clergy seat for a 6-year term. I believe it's now time for a runoff election. Madam Chairwoman, you have the ballots. Would the ushers please seal the chamber, tellers and ushers to the assembly well to receive the ballots for distribution. Do you have any special instructions at this time?
Again, only vote for 1. If you have a spoiled ballot, please hand it back to get a clean ballot. You do not need to fold these because they're so tiny. So just when you're done, please hand it to an usher or a teller near you.
If you're passing those down the aisles, invert them so they're upside down, pass it across, don't look at your neighbor's ballot. Voting members in front of the bar. Do not pass your ballots over until you're ordered to do so.
If you do not have a ballot, please raise your hand. Okay. If you have extra ballots, please make sure those with hands get them, tellers. Also up here in the front needs one. I need one. Ballots. Who's got extra ballots hanging around? Still needing ballots, front table.
Hold your ballots. Hold your ballots. Has everyone who has received a ballot, has you cast your vote? Is there anyone who has not received a ballot? Is there anyone who has spoiled their ballot? You may now turn your ballots into the center aisles for collection by the ushers. ballots that need to be retrieved? Any more ballots that need to be retrieved? Is that a ballot that needs to be retrieved over there? Kate, raise your hand if you still have ballots. Return all ballots to the elections chair. No, we don't need the same counters as yesterday. Okay, you got it? Balloting is declared closed. Elections committee and tellers, you're off to do your counting. As we adjourned yesterday to this morning, we pick up business where we left off. The motion on the floor is on the adoption of the budget. Is there any debate? Mr. Pastor Reinhardt, to what point do you rise? Hold it, time out. Is this mic on?
Yes. Should be.
No, it's not.
Turn it on.
I did.
Switch.
Pastor Reinhardt. Yes.
Bill Reignauer, First English Wheeling, Reverend Chair, I move consideration of the budget to a committee of the whole. Please ask for a second, and then I can speak to it.
Second.
It has been properly moved and seconded. I will restate the question. The motion is to commit to the consideration of the budget to committee of the whole. Proceed, Pastor Reinhardt.
By moving to a committee of the whole, the Assembly is freed from the shackles of parliamentary procedure for a period of time and is no longer operating under the burden of trying to remember if we're voting on the amendment to the amendment of the amendment, or if we're voting on the amendment to the main motion of the amendment. You get the idea.
The motion is to commit. Is there anyone speaking in the contrary? Okay. Yes. Is that a parliamentary inquiry, or are you speaking to the contrary? Parliamentary inquiry. Go ahead. Could you rise, sir? And John, could you rise, please? This is John Knowles, Clarksburg.
If the budget is given to the committee, then that's saying that we aren't going to pass the budget this time? No, this is the committee.
Hey, I get to answer those types of questions. Referral to the committee of the whole to explain what that does. Once that happens, we stop formal session and we technically go into adjournment until the committee of the whole comes back and reports. So that means we'll stop all other proceedings. Suddenly, this group will become a totally different group with a different chairman. They will then have the freedom to debate and discuss the budget without the constraints of parliamentary law, most parliamentary law, as Pastor Reinhardt has explained. When they are done with that, they will make a recommendation which will immediately come back to this body in formal session. Do you see how that works? So it's almost like saying, we've got all this Robert's Rule stuff, which, yes, I dearly love, I'll admit it. But we're going to say, okay, break that, we're going to scrap that so we can have a free and open discussion. And once that group that has a free and open discussion figures out what it really wants to do, we go back into formal session and move on from there. So no, this is not put it off to some committee and we'll never see it again. We're going to deal with it. We'll deal with it here, unless the committee of the whole ultimately decides, let's send it someplace else. But it will come back to this one way or the other. Does that answer your question, Mr. Knoll?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Anyone speaking on the contrary to committee of the whole? See, as Pastor Reinhardt has not specified a time, it would be immediate. And the only thing that would interfere with that would be the special orders that are already arranged. So what would happen is we have special orders at 11:15. We would stop committee of the whole, suspend that, come back to the regular body and do the special orders at 11:15.
And Reverend Chair, am I correct in believing that at any time a member of the Assembly can come and move that committee of the whole come to an end?
That is correct, but it would be a vote of the committee of the whole to come to the end. That is correct. It would also be the prerogative in committee of the whole to discuss this for a while and say, we want to wait a couple more hours in the day. We need other information. So committee of the whole functions like any other committee then at that point. Is that clear? Okay. Anyone speaking to the contrary? Any other questions? Seeing none, if you're ready for the vote on whether to commit to committee of the whole, and all in favor of committing the consideration of the budget to committee of the whole, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. The motion carries. The chair therefore appoints Joel Richter to be chair of the Committee of the Whole, and we are adjourned until the Committee of the Whole reports back. Thank you. Pastor Richter, the podium is yours.
Okay. So we've appointed a committee of the whole to talk about the budget. It's been voted on, and it's been seconded. Motion's been made, seconded, and voted on, passed. It's your talking, all right? Bill?
Thank you, Reverend Chair. How about that, Joel? Reverend Chair?
I like that.
There was some conversation last night and this morning, as you have these things, about the wisdom of moving to a committee of the whole. I was prepared to come and make a motion before. Some of us thought committee of the whole would be a better way to go. I'm going to speak to the committee of the whole first by putting out what I was going to move. Hopefully that just made some sense. And what I was going to move was taking our treasurer's admonition to come prepared to cut seriously. So my motion would have read that the unrestricted savings income line be reduced from $43,698 to zero. Because, I don't know about your household, but for my household, when I have to move the savings at the end of the month to cover the monthly budget, something's gone wrong, and that's not a good precedent to set. To make up for that cut of income from savings, I would have moved to reduce mission support from the ELCA from $134,984 to $116,286, and to reduce the line item for United Lutheran Seminary from $26,000 to $1,000. Again, taking seriously the treasurer's admonition to come prepared to cut. I would have followed that up by moving to encourage Senate Council in the crafting of the proposed 2021 budget to imagine the Senate as a brand new entity with X amount of proposed income to work with, and then literally putting a blank sheet of paper on the table, letting imagination run loose, and craft a budget. I've been around since '97. The budget in front of us looks the same as it did in 1997. The line items are basically the same. The numbers have changed over the years. It looks like the same budget. We're not the same Senate. Such a move would allow Senate Council to be freed from the actions of previous assemblies and what they have directed. It's time for something different. Time for something different. And along with that would be the encouragement for Senate Council to employ, ask for, conscript, or demand any assistant it deems appropriate in that process so that the burden is shared. Now I'm going to go back there and sit down.
Thanks, Bill.
Pastor Rick Eggman, Shepherd of the Hills. Reverend Chair, I was wondering if we could hear from the treasurer, are there decisions of previous assemblies that have not gone into consideration for this budgetary process that need to be evaluated or reconsidered?
So what was the question? Are there decisions?
Are there decisions of previous assemblies that may need to be reevaluated in light of the situation that we are facing?
Is that something? Can I do that? Yeah. There's the treasurer. Okay.
Matthew Riegel, Bishop of the Synod. Having been the chair of the Synod Finance Committee since 1998,
Okay.
with one short break before then, I think I might be competent to answer this question.
Sounds good to me, Bishop Riegel.
The only definitive rule ever established by the Synod Assembly for the budgetary process is a rule about 1% of the expenditure side of the budget being dedicated to the roster leader debt reduction. Okay. there's plenty of precedent. There's plenty of things that we have voted on in the past that we have used as precedent, but that's the only binding one, and that would have to be undone. Other than that, it's wide open. Each assembly is free to adopt a budget as it sees fit.
Okay. Thank you, man. Thank you, Bishop Riegel.
Patrice Warwick, pastor at St. Paul's, New Haven. I want to add to Bill Ridenhour's reductions. Also would suggest that we consider zeroing out Teal College and our giving there. Also zero out our giving to Carolina Furnace Lutheran Camp. We have a camp on our territory that serves us very well. And also zeroing out our gift to Lake Run Lutheran Services. They do not provide services on our territory, have never done that, and I think we can cut them out.
Okay. So you're making suggestions that we zero out Teal College, Carolina Lutheran.
Caroline Furnace Lutheran Camp and Lake Run Lutheran Services.
Okay. Thank you, Patrice.
Jerry Kleiner, St. Paul Lutheran Church, Morgantown. This synod has traditionally been a full partner in the West Virginia Council of Churches. I question whether or not that is a sustainable move for us. The West Virginia Council of Churches receives, in this current budget, $5,000 from the synod. I have been the ecumenical officer. I say this with a heavy heart. I think we have to question whether or not full status in the West Virginia Council of Churches serves us, whether associate status or even withdrawing from the Council of Churches might be suitable.
Okay, thank you, Jerry.
Rosa McKinney, Trinity Lutheran in Charleston. I am formerly a state employee who was the foster care program specialist for the state of West Virginia. Glade Run does provide services at their main campus for children from the state of West Virginia who are in custody of the state of West Virginia. So it is in error to say that they do not provide services to us.
Thank you.
If it please the chair, my name is Mark Salzgiver, Shepherd Hills Church in Haven. I've dealt with budgets most of my career, and this one looks really tough. I even considered such radical things as perhaps having a half-time bishop, but that doesn't sound good. What I came up with is of the 44,000 restricted savings that are basically plugging the income side, I've considered having the synod employees work from home, thereby decreasing the $12,600 in rent and $1,450 in cleaning, only $3,000 telephone and internet, because they're going to have expenses for that too. In addition, it gets us down to $17,000. I would take $6,000 away from Lutheran United Services, the Lutheran Seminary, and $11,000 for campus ministry, are able to plug down to zero. Okay.
Patrice Warwick, St. Paul's, New Haven. Comment that the lady from Trinity made. Glade Run has closed the residential campus at Zeeland-Opal about 3 years ago. So they do not provide services at their main campus any longer for anybody, any children. They do have now a program for some residential autistic children, and they have a school there, but they do not provide mental health services any longer there at their main campus.
Okay.
Just wanted to clarify.
Sean Smith, Cooperative Lutheran Ministries. Following up on Mike's suggestion about having a part-time bishop, I wonder, this is more of an inquiry that we might want to talk about, and it would probably be our bishop who could speak to it. Is it necessary to
Pastor Tim Spence, Grace Lutheran Church, Wheeling, probably one of the few pastors in the room whose ordination and tenure predates the 1988 merger. At that time, there were a number of agreements entered into with what was at that time the West Penn, West Virginia Synod, as it was divided into Northwest Penn, Southwest Penn, and West Virginia, Western Maryland. Those agreements had to do with shared support of things like campus ministry and the Archives Center and things like that. I'd like to know, I know the agreement for the Archives Center is still in place. I'd like to know what other agreements are still in place for the shared ministries of predecessor ministries that were shared on the West Penn, West Virginia territory.
It's an inquiry, I took it as. Because he wants to know what agreements. We're going to let Bishop Riegel speak first because we have inquiry on what agreements are still in place.
Matthew Riegel, Bishop of the Synod. The only shared functions that we currently have compacts on are candidacy committee operations. So that's a bisynodical candidacy committee. And the archives, although we could back out of the archives, I would only bring it to the Assembly's attention. There's a constitutional requirement that we maintain archives, so we would just have to find a different way to do it. There was a historic agreement with Lutheran Campus Ministry, but that compact was dissolved in 2010 or 2011. At this point, everything else is just an individual agreement. It's not a compact in which we basically have a treaty with another synod.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Bishop Riegel.
This is a little bit more information.
Go ahead.
On that point. So when the Tri-Synodical Compact that still existed for campus ministry broke up in 2010, that sort of greatly and gravely changed the funding for the Lutheran campus ministry at WVU. It went from receiving upwards of $50,000 to $60,000 a year from the various three synods to the current position that we're at now at $20,000 a year. Southwest Penn, which is the biggest funder of those three synods, devoted all their funds to the campus ministry of Pittsburgh. So they start out with about $60,000 to $70,000 from their synod annually. I'm not quite sure about Northwest Penn, but from synodical funding, and as our largest donor of the campus ministry is the West Virginia, Western Maryland Synod. And it makes up about a fifth of our budget, and it's quite vital to us and relatively in the scheme of synodical funding for campus ministry. Although it seems like one of our largest line items, it's actually comparatively somewhat small.
Okay. Thank you, Tony.
So I actually have a motion.
Okay.
I'm Reverend Gerald Kleiner, St. Paul, Morgantown. We've heard a lot of stuff thrown up into the air, which doesn't seem to gain us anywhere down the road. So I move that the West Virginia, Western Maryland Synod withdraw from the West Virginia Council of Churches and the Lutheran, Anglican, Roman Catholic, United Methodist dialogue with whatever expenses are concurred there, effective this budget.
Okay. Is there a second? Seeing no second, the motion, second. Okay, there is a second. So we have Jerry who moved it. There's a second. So Jerry, you have the right to speak to this motion.
We unfortunately are faced with a trajectory that is, according to the charts that are in our booklets, dire. I am committed to ecumenism, but I think it's safe to say ecumenism on a corporate level has basically run its course. Ecumenism now is on the local level and is about the local connections that clergy are making with their neighboring colleagues. I think basically if it means that we don't have a synod, we must preserve the synod first and then find other creative ways to do ecumenism rather than the corporate approach that has fallen into a winter. And in particular, I think the two expenses that I would put my finger on are the West Virginia Council of Churches as far as a membership, but also the Lutheran, Anglican, Roman Catholic, now United Methodist dialogue that we participated with, that seems to just be spinning its wheels. So that's my suggestion on a tangible budget cut.
Okay. Just a clarification. I need a clarification first from our wonderful, I have a parliamentary inquiry of Matt. This is committee of whole, this is how I understand it. We have a motion, this is a vote for a recommendation that will come back to the main floor.
That would be correct. So what should happen is, at the very end of this process, you would review all the things that were sort of moved and voted, because this is a very informal consideration.
Right.
And then the committee would frame it as a report. So in some respects, what Pastor Kleiner has done, he's made a motion within a committee that doesn't have final standing until the committee makes a final decision about its report. So it becomes part of a larger report. So it's in order. It can be discussed, debated, and voted on. But in the end, this body will have to decide what it's actually sending to the whole thing.
I just want to make sure I was correct.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bishop Riegel.
And Reverend Chair, the only thing that I would bring up as a point of personal privilege is there's unlimited coffee and beverages in the back.
Mountain Dew would be nice right now.
Do we speak for or against this now?
This is what you, this is, it functions as a committee. A motion's been made in the committee. The motion has been made, it's been seconded. It's a valid motion. We speak to the motion. And once the motion is voted upon, yes or no, we go back to the main function of the committee.
What if someone wishes to speak against the motion?
You can speak against the motion
At
too.
this time?
Yes. The pertinent debate at this time would be, are we for or against the motion? And I think, and I got, is this inquiry? Okay.
What is the Larkham line item?
Larkham line. Okay. What? Can you guys get that?
No, I mean, where is it? Where is it on the?
He's asking for a restatement of the motion. You're asking for the line item. Pastor Matt Wilbert's finding about the line item, bringing it up to you right now, and I'm trying to answer his question about the motion. It was a motion to withdraw from the West Virginia Council of Churches and Larkham. And I have a, go ahead.
Pam Britt, New Hope Lutheran. Pam Britt, New Hope Lutheran Church. I have a question for the bishop, if he may be called to answer.
She has a question for the bishop. What's the question first?
Question is the benefits he sees of belonging to the West Virginia Council of Churches.
Okay.
And Larkham.
Sounds good to me. He's right there to provide some.
You want me for something?
Yeah, she had a question for the bishop.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed it as I was.
The benefits that you see for being parts of West Virginia Council of the Churches and Larkham.
The benefit that I see of being part of the West Virginia Council of Churches, there would be a couple that I would enumerate. One would be it provides it provides a platform for me to interface with other ecumenical partners, so it provides a networking platform. Provides some intellectual stimulation, so that's a personal benefit. I don't know that's any benefit to the Synod. It also provides a mechanism for advocacy and justice issues. I will be perfectly honest, a lot of people have criticized me over the last 3.5 years for not being sufficiently justice-oriented and advocacy-oriented, but my consideration is I let the West Virginia Council of Churches do that for me, in that they put together a legislative handbook. I do participate in that process of putting that handbook together. Sometimes actively, sometimes not. I mean, if it looks pretty good to me, I don't fuss about anything. So for me, it's the extension of the advocacy work in West Virginia, Western Maryland. But you've asked me what I perceive as the benefits. It's up to you to decide whether or not that's a cost-benefit analysis that wins.
Do you have an inquiry or is it a?
This is an inquiry.
Okay.
Who or what is LARCOM?
LARCOM is Lutheran, Anglican, Roman Catholic Methodists. I got it almost. And it's basically a group between these four church organizations to have conversation and do ecumenical ministries together. And they typically have a event every year in September where people go gather together for theological education.
And what's the other one?
Methodists. United Methodists. Lutheran, Anglican, Roman Catholic, United Methodists.
What's the rest of this?
It's just an organization. It's the those four church bodies in the state work together to have conversation, and they do have some theological education that's joined based upon ecumenicism. Is it inquiry or okay?
I can see West Virginia Catholic churches in the budget. Is LARCOM in the budget anywhere that we're talking about?
No, it is not. We just touched base with, I just touched base with the treasurer looking for that. LARCOM is not reflected in the budget in that we do not send specific designation to LARCOM. However, we do have expenses by sending the bishop there, advertising their stuff, that sort of thing.
From Matthew Regal Bishop, to thank you, Pastor Holberg, for getting that information. That is correct. It is not funded by a line item in the budget. LARCOM's principal activity is the once-a-year dialogue session, which is a 3-day event open to clergy and laity. The Synod pays for my registration to attend that event and my housing for that event, and obviously my travel for that event. The other cost would be when we plan the event, we have had conference calls from time to time. So there's sometimes a conference call responsibility, but we usually try to do as much by email. Lastly, the Synod has historically paid for the meals for every Lutheran that attends the event. So when pastors and lay folks register for the event and they pay a registration fee, their registration fee is for the use of the facility, for their lodging, but not for their meals. And so that's all coming out of a buried line in the budget, which is basically, I forget which line it is, but it might be like my travel and hospitality line. So the Synod would have the prerogative to say that we will no longer pay for anybody's meals at LARCOM, that they'll have to pay for themselves, and it'll be a small reduction. Meals are rather cheap and not a lot of people go, but that is a reasonable suggestion.
Sherry Schaefer, Executive Director, Community Lutheran Partners. I rise in opposition to the motion. I work closely with West Virginia Council of Churches. We are a small body in this Synod, or in this state, and by supporting what the West Virginia Council of Churches does, it kind of helps our small voice have a larger voice in what goes on in our state. I work closely with them in disaster relief work. Can I do that without them? Yes. But it's important that we have their presence in this state, it's important that we are a part of their presence in the state because they do give voice also to our concerns and what our advocacy issues are. They are the oldest council of churches in the country. We have been a part of them for a very long time, and I just think for us to pull our support, as you can see, we've already lowered it down to where it's only 5,000. I think that would be it would be a tragedy for the West Virginia Council of Churches. And so I rise in opposition to the motion to remove them from the budget.
Thank you.
Pastor Carl Ames, Christ the King, Marbursville. I speak like Sherry in opposition to the motion. We've talked about how important the relationship is in the Synod, and I think to sever our relationship with the West Virginia Council of Churches is not a good idea, and it ignores, as Sherry says, the work they do. It ignores the fact that Bishop says we rely on them for justice and advocacy. I also speak in opposition to canceling our
zeroing out. Okay, I also speak in opposition to the motion about zeroing out our support of the West Virginia Council of Churches. I think Pastor Ridenhour was more on the right track, at least as a start in the way we ought to be thinking. And I also would just add that I think we ought to think incrementally here and not trying to do everything at once. Say, let's solve this problem in 1 year, but perhaps establish some direction here and a trajectory to go forward into over the next successive years. But anyway, speaking against the motion.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Bruce Dalton. I'm an outgoing member of Synod Council and also a member of St. John's Lutheran in Davis. I want to speak against the motion, and I'm not sure this is in order or not, but I believe enough in Larkham that I will pay the expenses of the bishop and the current costs that are involved for us to remain in as part of Larkham. I can't imagine it's more than $500 a year because it's quite a it's quite an inexpensive thing, and I have probably been to Larkham myself for 10 years, and it is an amazing experience, especially for a layperson.
Emily Theobald Rollins, pastor at Christ Vienna. I speak against the motion. I serve as the co-chair of the Faith and Order Unit of the West Virginia Council of Churches. I also serve on our Synod Council. While it may seem that there is no benefit of ecumenism at a corporate level, we do a lot of ecumenism locally, which is also reflected in the corporate level. Bishop spoke to the advocacy issues. We could not do that alone by ourselves. And much like the financial struggles we face here, our other denominations that are participating bodies in the West Virginia Council of Churches are also facing similar decisions. So we're not by ourselves. It is easy to think with scarcity. Right now, we're cutting nickel and diming everything on this budget. We are going to have to seriously, not just at this Synod Assembly, but coming years, looking drastically of how we operate as a Synod. Because you can cut $250 here, $5,000 here. That does not address the bigger issue here, folks. And at the same time, we need to see with abundance instead of scarcity of the ministry we are called to do here in this region. Thank you for your time.
Yes?
We have heard from 5, I think, against. Should we not be asking for anybody to score?
I'm going to let Matt correct me if I'm wrong. But when it comes to, this is a committee of the whole, right? That's what it's called. It's more like a committee meeting than it is like who's for and against. If there are people who are for, they're welcome to come and speak. Am I wrong, Matt?
That's right. Anybody can get in the line to speak to the question that's in front of us. Even though it's a committee, you should always limit your conversation to the immediately pending question. Otherwise, it gets terribly, terribly confusing. But yeah, and if you're in favor of what Pastor Kleiner has proposed, come to a mic. If you're opposed, come to a mic. If you want to amend it, come to a mic. If you're tired of discussing it, come to a mic. But you need to get in the queue, and the only things that should be raised without getting into the queue would be points of parliamentary inquiry or matters of personal privilege or points of information or points of order.
And someone could easily call or move a question, too.
Yeah, but they'd need to get in the queue for that.
Right. I just wanted to point that out. Go ahead.
Hey, I'm Britt New Hope Lutheran Church. Call for the question.
Is there anybody? Okay. I don't think we have to vote or call for the question. We vote on the move.
Yeah.
Call we do? Okay, then. All those, go ahead.
Could we please have the motion read again? I've lost track of where we are.
West Virginia, Western Maryland Synod withdraw from the Council of Churches in Markham. All those in, so it's a simple call question, so it's a vote, right? Vote, we're basically, well, let me tell you, we're voting on whether we want to vote. Stop discussion. Once you stop discussion, we'd immediately go into a vote on the amendment. All those in favor of calling the question, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? No. No. Okay. So, okay, the discussion on the amendment is closed. So now we go into vote. Do we want to approve the amendment or not? All those in favor of the amendment, and I'll read that one more time. It's West Virginia, Western Maryland Synod withdraw from Larkham and the West Virginia Council of Churches.
Point of order.
Yeah.
This is not an amendment, this is a main motion.
Main motion, sorry. So all those in favor of that, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion fails. So we go back to discussing the committee of the whole's purpose, which is the budget and those matters.
Sean Smith, Cooperative Lutheran Ministries. I rise to make a motion that we send to Synod Council the task of looking at office staffing and how that might be reduced and the work of the Synod still be done in order to reduce costs on those parts of the budget. Well, we have two currently, secretary and a bishop.
She's got it. So it's a motion to send to Synod Council to address staffing.
Joel, getting back to Ridenour's original proposal. I
Yes.
was wrong when I said I was wrong.
I heard that.
Culpa, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. I was wrong when I said that was a main motion. No, it was an amendment. Ridenour's is the main motion.
True.
At this point. And so we should return to that. Sorry.
We did return back to that after that. And he came up here to make another motion. He made a motion to go to
Joel, read off. You have Ridenour's motion up there. Please read it off for everybody.
what was the first, what was the motion for the committee of the whole? Do we have that one?
Oh, correction. Ridenour actually never made that motion. So I'm wrong again.
I like this.
So to follow the game thing, we were put in the committee of the whole.
Right.
And then
We have one
Kleiner
motion.
made his motion, which was a main motion within
Right.
the committee of the whole. That failed. Ridenour never did make his proposed main motion.
Right.
Correct?
And then what happened is that motion was what came before us to talk about. It failed. Sean has put forth a new motion that we're trying to get out to read, and it was to send to Synod Council the task of office staffing and how it can be reduced in order to reduce costs. Was there a second for that motion? Carl seconded it, so we are talking about this motion, which is also a main motion, and that's up for discussion. Is that what you rose for, Pastor Rick?
Can I make an amendment to that motion?
Yeah, you can.
Pastor Rick Eggett, Shepherd of the Hills. I amend. Pastor Rick Eggett, Shepherd of the Hills. I'd like to amend that motion to include the possible combining of the offices of bishop and DEM.
He makes an amendment to the motion and possibly include the bishop, combining the offices of the bishop and the DEM. Is there a second to the amendment? And Carl seconds the amendment. So now discussion is just upon the amendment, not upon Sean's main motion. DEM is Director of Evangelism and Mission. Each Synod has one within the ELCA. It's paid half-time by ELCA churchwide, and the other funds come if it's a full-time position from the Synod. And if you remember Helen Harms? Helen Harms was our DEM for years. We don't have one as of right now. Right now, it's in, I don't, is there a DM reflective in our budget, Joe? Go ahead, Paul.
Paul Weinberg, Vice President, and also member of Trinity in Martinsburg. Speaking to that, and this is information, the DEM is covered by churchwide. It is not in our budget. There is some question, though, in terms of how that whole thing is processed. I'm actually going to speak against the motion because I do think that needs to be addressed, but I'm not sure that that's the way it ought to be addressed. Right now, we do not have a DEM. Helen Harms was a DEM. She was 50% time for DEM. Then we were without a DEM for about a year and a half, and Dr. Gil Walkaning came in and served as our DEM, and he, because of his time available at United Lutheran Seminary, needed to step out of that position. So we are without a DEM, and it is a good time to make consideration as to how to address that. So from that standpoint, it makes sense, but I think to say we want to combine the two brings another question into it. So from that standpoint, I think we need to address it, but I'm not sure that the motion is the best way to do that. So I would speak against the motion.
Thank you, Paul.
It's cutting half the bishop's salary. Just a question. It would be, the cost savings would be cutting half a bishop's salary. That's what the cost savings is. And I think we need to think in terms of what the role of the bishop is that we need, and that's why it's a bigger question.
Pastor Tim Spence, Grace Lutheran Church. I would speak against the motion for the simple reason that there is some suggestion coming out of Chicago that the DEM program is no longer going to be sustainable within 2 or 3 years. So this would be at best a short-term solution, and so I'm not sure it should be on the table.
Point of information, can that actually be done, the bishop and DEMB roles? Yes, they can be. Thank you.
There's nobody else up to speak. We will have a vote on the amendment on whether it approves or goes down. And the amendment, once again, was to add the bishop and the DEM to the conversation of how do we look at our office staff. Okay. Amend to include the offices of bishop and the DEM. All those in favor?
Make sure that you understand that this is an amendment to a motion that's significant, that's right here. And so that motion will...
Right. What will happen, just to give an idea, Pastor Sean Smith made a motion to review into the business of the office staff. Pastor Rick Egvitt made an amendment to that motion to include the bishop and the DEM. What we are voting on right now is the bishop and the DEM part. If that passes, then it goes into the main amendment and we vote on that. If this fails, it's removed, it's not into the main motion, and we go talk about the main motion, which we have not done. Does that make sense?
Linda Mueller. Thanks, Linda. Somebody was going to do that, right? Linda Mueller, St. Mark's, Clarksburg. So, just a point of clarification. What I heard Rick Eckfett say was that he was amending it to suggest that the office of the bishop and the DEM position be combined and that each be half-time. What I'm seeing this on the screen to say is that is different. what I'm reading this to say is that just the bishop and the DEM get included in that discussion about staffing, not that it's a halftime thing.
I just conferred with the various people with the minutes, and all of them say combined. So what is said there? There was no discussion on making them half-time. It just was to combine the offices together. I think.
But the amendment doesn't say that up there. It says to include the office of the bishop and the DEM. You mean include them in the discussion?
To include combining the offices of the bishop.
The wording I have is to include the possibility of combining the office of the bishop and DEM.
Right, that's,
So we need to ask Mr. Edmund if that's
Is that,
correct.
he gave us the thumbs up in the back. So it's to combine.
okay, point of clarification.
Thank you, Pastor Morley. So now that clarification's done, anybody else have any other? So let us come to vote on the amendment. All those in favor of adding the amendment to include the possibility of combining the bishop and the DEM position, please. Office of the bishop.
To include the possibility of combining the office of the office, meaning I believe staff, Pastor Edmund, of bishop and DEM, not combining that position.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I have that you wanted us to include the possibility of combining the offices of the bishop and DEM, not combining the position of the bishop and the DEM. Is it the staff that you wish to share?
As the original motion is to have the Synod Assembly look at personnel issues. Synod Council, sorry. Synod Council to address personnel issues.
Right.
My amendment was simply to include the,
Just pull the mic into your hand.
to include the possibility of having the office of the bishop and the DEM combined to be part of that discussion as well, which would have potential financial implications that could derive to the synod, depending on what are the functionalities that are desired on behalf of the incumbent of that office.
Mm-hmm.
I can't hear you. Sorry.
What do you mean by office?
What do you?
Building or position?
Let's.
We're talking about office staffing, so you have the bishop and you have the DEM, the combining of those two positions.
Okay, so it's the positions, the combining of both the bishop and the DEM position. It's not offices. It's just the two positions would be combined as one. I mean, I'm saying that so that people clearly understand.
So change office, John?
That could be. We're just trying to get this right. So. Okay, I'm just. You have something to say or against?
I have a question about clarity, and I want to make a statement, and it may not be correct, so someone may have to correct me.
Okay.
Right now, the DEM position is not funded in our budget, right? It's funded by church-wide.
Correct.
So what the intent, I think, Rick, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be talking to you, but I think the intent here is to try and bring those Chicago dollars into our budget to basically subsidize the position of the bishop by combining it with the DEM position. So this would have the net effect of bringing dollars into our budget. I think that's the intent. Okay, so be aware that this does not save us any money in the budget by eliminating a position. What it's doing is bringing new dollars into the budget and liberating other monies for other things. Am I?
Yeah, you can clarify. Go ahead. Because it's a clarification.
We have to be careful in money coming from church-wide that we feel we can use as a part of our budget. Money coming from church-wide would only go to the purpose for which it is there, which would be to fund a DEM position, which is a specified position, and it would mean that the bishop's role, if that bishop is also part-time DEM, needs to do half the time as a DEM and not as a bishop. That's what you need to keep in mind.
Thank you, Paul. Bishop Reed?
Reverend Chair, I move a 30-minute recess for snacks and drinks, and with the understanding that during those 30 minutes, people are free to caucus and come up with proposals and stuff like that. So I ask a 30-minute recess for snacks and breaks.
So it's voted upon, right? Second. We have a second. Okay. Well, I'm not getting in trouble. All in favor of recess? There we go. Thank you. You don't have to. Attention, quick attention. If you are still checked into the hotel, this would be a good time to check out. Okay? session at 10:24. There we go. I hear I mumble. Let's first get back to where we were. We were, right before the break, we were discussing, I'm going to need the amendment again to read, it's right there. We were discussing an amendment by Pastor Rick Egvid, and the reality of this amendment was to include the possibility of combining the job of bishop and DEM position. That was to a previous main motion, which was by Sean Smith, and the motion by Sean Smith was to explore the possibilities of what we do within the Senate office. So from what at this point, I just say let's just do a simple vote on the amendment unless anybody has something to talk about on the amendment. Okay, all those in favor of Pastor Rick Egvid's amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Nay. So the amendment does not pass. Now we can actually open discussion for that first amendment, which was for the main motion, which was on the Senate office and staffing. And I think I see Reverend Bill Ridenhour coming to the mic.
That's exactly right, Randy. Bill Ridenhour, First English Wheeling, call the question.
Question's been called. Second? All those in favor? Aye. And now we'll go back, question is closed. Let's vote on the amendment by Sean Smith. All those in favor of Sean Smith's main motion of sending to Senate Council to discuss the possibilities of staffing within the office of the Senate, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Aye. Motion passes. And just a note here, some good advice from Bishop Regal was we can be formal and informal here. We can discuss things. We don't always have to have things to put amendments or make motions forth. And what we can just do is have a discussion and see if there's something we can come to and draft a bigger amendment or suggestion at the end. Go ahead, Nancy.
Nancy Weeks, Grace Evangelical Lutheran Church, Wheeling. I'm here to make a motion. I rise to move the following actions be taken in consideration of the proposed budget. 1, unrestricted savings income be reduced from $43,698 to 0. Mission support for the ELCA be reduced to 30%. United Lutheran Seminary be reduced to $1,000. That we continue to adjust the budget. Teal College, 0. Carolina Furnace Lutheran Camp, 0. Glade Run Lutheran Services, 0. Maintaining our level of support to campus ministry, WVU. Campus ministry within the Synod territory, Camp Luther, and Community Lutheran Partners. 4, Synod Council be instructed to craft a proposed 2021 budget by imagining this synod to be brand new, an entity with X amount of dollars projected income that does not have to be captive to what we have done in the past. In other words, bringing in a blank sheet of paper on the table and letting our imagination run. And finally, Synod Council be instructed to employ, ask for, constrict, and or demand any assistance it deems appropriate so that others may help in the development of this budget and to carry this motion forward.
Can we have a copy of that?
Can.
And I heard a second already come out. Okay. So, Nancy, well, I'll take it. Nancy has the right to comment.
I speak in favor of this motion. What we are doing currently is not working. What we are doing currently will cause the Lutheran presence to diminish and be lost. Maybe not in our generation, but in the generation of my grandchildren. It reminds me of the book that I read once that said, "Who moved my cheese?" And ladies and gentlemen, if we don't move our cheese, it's going to mold. It's time. I ask you to put your faith in who we are and envision what we can be in mission to this synod and in outreach. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Dan Loffer. I'm with Christ the King, a layperson. An observation that I would ask for the body to consider. The previous speaker spoke of making changes to the budget that address what I believe are more fundamental issues for this organization, and that is restating the mission statement of this synod, its vision for the next 3 to 5 years, and actually structurally sitting down and discussing what the future goals are of the synod, so that we can start with that blank sheet of paper, that zeroed out budget, and determine how best we are going to address the issues that we see the synod is facing. And most corporations have a strategic plan that's brought back to their board to share with the members what the strategy is for the coming year, and some, agreement among the bodies that the direction of the synod is in the right direction, or the direction of the corporation is in the right direction. So what you're asking for is in my mind, developing a 3-year strategic plan where you're going to outline what the goals are of the synod that are based in the mission and vision of the Lutheran Church. Thank you.
Joseph Solberg, Synod Treasurer, Church of the Covenant in Grafton. I rise to speak in favor of the main motion. The main motion, as it is presented, fixes our problem at where it stands at the moment, assuming congregations send the same amount next year that they sent last year. That is an excellent start for this assembly. It does make philosophical statements about our organization and our mission. Those are statements that I believe have to come from the assembly itself. I believe that you all should be involved in that discussion, and this is the way that we have involved you in that discussion, and that it shouldn't come from a few people in a room. So I wish to speak in favor of this and say, if you were to pass this with the other resolution that you've passed and come out of committee and lift that up to the Synod Council, I believe that you have put a sufficient enough stop loss on the deficit that we have, and have sent Synod Council forward with enough resolve that we can return with a more sustainable synod next year. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to make an amendment, Pastor Matt Day, St. John's, Martinsburg. I'd like to amend that we strike Caroline Furnace from the zero out.
Is there a second? There's a second.
May I speak?
Yes, you may, and we're speaking about the amendment about striking Caroline Furnace to zero.
The churches that benefit the most from Caroline Furnace is the Eastern Panhandle churches. We are an hour and a half away from Caroline Furnace. We use them, St. John's in particular, but also the other churches in the Panhandle can and have in the past used Caroline Furnace for retreats during the year. Less in the recent years with sending kids to camp. To cut out Caroline Furnace means that the Eastern Panhandle is going to have to pick up for the $2,500 that we are sending. And I don't have St. John's itself does not have an extra $2,500 to send, so we would cut it from elsewhere, and it would probably most likely be a cut to the Synod benevolence as a whole. So in general, that's how St. John's would look at this and would try to fix this. Thank you.
Thank you. We are talking about the amendment. So if anybody else would like to talk about the amendment? Yeah.
Pam Pritt, New Hope Lutheran. I speak in favor of the amendment, even though I'm geographically far, far away from there. But if we looked at the population map yesterday, that's one of the areas of growth. If we are going to indeed grow our churches, that's one of the places where it can happen.
Thank you, Pam. Any other conversations about the amendment?
My name is Michael Wright from the Aurora Red House Lutheran Parish. I speak in favor of the amendment. I am a strong proponent of camp ministry and youth ministry in general. I think that if we were to zero out that says a statement about our Synod's view on how we would like to support youth ministry going forward and how we envision our future with the youth, I think cutting that out is a negative statement on that.
Thank you, Michael. Reverend Michael. Any others comments on the amendment? If not, go ahead, Matt.
No, if you're ready to vote on it, vote on it.
I have one person in the back, so you may wanted to say something. Then then we can go and just vote on it because it appears that everybody's raised.
Please, Chair, I stand in favor of the amendment, but wish to include more expenses possibly be considered for cutting, including the earlier mentioned.
Why don't we just stick to the amendment and not add the additional expenses?
So we're going to vote on things one at a time to cut or keep?
Well, this is actually, we don't have to vote on one at a time.
Okay.
But when the amendment has been made by one at a time and you're wanting to add additional expenses, we have to do amendment on amendment. I think it'd be easier, more concrete for us to do it if we do that in one lump. I agree, one lump time. But because of the way this has already come forward, it leaves more confusion.
So maybe.
Mike. Go ahead, Matt.
I rise to a point of information
Okay.
that may be useful for the Assembly. Provision S-1513 of the Synod Constitution. On the basis of estimated income, the Synod Council shall authorize expenditures within the budget for the fiscal year. Expenditure authorization shall be subject to revision in light of changing conditions by the Synod Council. The effect of that is that no matter what we adopt as a budget on the expense side of this, the Synod Council has the prerogative, if there is not sufficient income, and it does not want to dip into unrestricted savings unless the unrestricted savings have been authorized, can make reductions wherever it sees fit to make reductions. Okay? That's something you need to know. So when you make a reduction of this on the budget, then Synod Council cannot expend beyond what you have budgeted. But Synod Council can always expend less than you have budgeted if there are not sufficient funds to cover the budget. On the income side of it, which is not up there, I thought I had two sides. Don't change anything. On the income side, when you specify a number for draw from unrestricted savings, the Synod Council is in a sense obligated to draw up to that number to fund the expense side. If you reduce the unrestricted side, draw from unrestricted side on the income, it would compel Synod Council to figure out where to cut on its own the other sections. But they would have total freedom to cut other sections as they would see fit.
Okay, that was a point of information. We're on the amendment. So I'm going to go, are you speaking to the, or for or against the amendment?
Neither. I wanted to make another motion.
You cannot until actually, what we have is we have a main motion. we have an amendment to the main motion. We can make an amendment to the amendment, or we can vote on, what we can also do is vote on this amendment, go back to the main motion, and if it's an amendment to that main motion, we can do amendment on that main motion when time comes. Yet, or we can just,
I call for the question on the motion, the amendment.
is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of voting on the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Okay, now to the amendment. The amendment is to add Caroline Furnace back into the budget based upon the main motion. All those in favor of not removing and adding Caroline Furnace back in, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes. And do you have an amendment to the main motion?
No, I'm just waiting.
Okay. So we are back to the main motion, which Nancy Weeks has passed through. I'm going to read it. She can. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of voting on the main motion, which is we adjust the budget by deleting giving to ULS. Yeah, they don't know what the main motion is at this point. Because we've been talking about the other part. I think it's. Okay, here we go. The main motion is unrestricted savings income be reduced to 0. Mission support to the ELC be reduced to 30%. ULS seminary reduced to $1,000. 0 out Teal College. 0 out Glade Run services. Maintain campus WVU. Campus West Virginia, Maryland Synod Territory. Camp Luther. Community Lutheran Partners. And Caroline Furnace. We're not voting on that. We're voting on whether we want to vote on that and then discussion. So just to let you know. So all who are all in favor of ending discussion and voting on this motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay. All opposed? Aye. It passes, so we will vote on them. Okay, then.
Reduce to 30%.
I was just corrected. They said it was by, not to.
Two, not percent. Two, 30%.
So it was corrected.
30%.
Well, 30%. Are 30% of, from what I understand, it's 30% of what is given to the Senate. Is that right? Right. Okay. Hey, can you scroll down?
Can we call and ask Nancy
Actually, I need a figure from Joe. He figured it out. The 30% translates to what dollar?
Yes, computer. Basically, we're going to be sending them $122,712.90, assuming that the same amount of mission support comes in next year that came in last year.
It's 30% of our mission support, correct?
So currently, we send them 33%. This would modify it and reduce it to 30%.
And what I understood is to reduce it to the original amount of $116,000 was below the bar of what is acceptable at that 30%. Is that correct?
Below 30% is a hard number to digest. It is our prerogative. We can go below 30%. That would not be my recommendation.
Okay. 30%.
Here is the original motion, and I'm just going to read it because it's in my hand. And this is the one I got that you sent out.
Okay, this is the one you have to change. Did you get the one where I marked 30%?
Yep.
Okay. We changed from a dollar amount to 30%.
I see that they changed it on there, so I can say this.
Okay.
It says, in reference instructed to employ, ask for, conscript, and/or demand any assistance it deems appropriate that others may help carry this burden.
There's an addition to that motion.
And then here it says we adjust the budgets. We adjust the budget by deleting ULS to 1,000, by deleting, giving to ULS $1,000. Teal College to 0, Caroline Furnace, that's changed. Glade Run Lutheran Services to 0, and maintain support to Campus Ministry WVU, Campus Ministry Senate Terrace, Camp Luther, Community Lutheran Partners Incorporated.
What's the total change in budget from all that?
I do not know. Can someone help me with that question?
Joe figured that out. He can bring it to us.
Joe is working on that right now. We have someone else who's speaking on this part.
Hi, Victoria Flood, Director for Mission Support of the Churchwide Organization. I just wanted to make three kind of observations about all of this so far, and the first one is that somebody actually asked me yesterday, is the Synod going to be seen differently depending on what is shared in mission support? And I took that actually as a question, looking back at what I talked about yesterday of how we define our worth. And our worth is not defined by dollar amounts. So I want you to know that the relationship is not a relationship that's based on a specific dollar amount that is shared. That said, I also want to say that the idea of what you will send to them is really what you will be providing for all of us together. So I just wanted to make that clear. It's not a them, and it's also not me and the churchwide organization. Whatever dollar amount is reduced, if we want to continue to support the ministries we do together, it's your other 64 synods that will need to come up with the difference. It's not me, it's not the churchwide organization, it's the churchwide as a structure. Secondly, I just wanted to mention that just a question of, is money driving the priorities and the values for mission, or are priorities and values driving the dollar, of the mission driving what you decide to do with the dollars? And the last thing that I want to say then about that is that from my perspective, as a priority and a value, I would say that a synod of this size and these challenges that we talked about yesterday, saying as an overall value that 2/3 of what our congregations share stays within the synod, and 1/3 is shared for ministries that we do together beyond the synod is an effective, a good value to have. And so to whatever extent that value can be lifted up, I would support that. That's it.
Thank you. Did we have a number yet, Joseph?
Yeah, so the total cost savings is $37,771.
So the total cost savings of this main motion is $37,771? Okay.
Nancy Weeks, Grace Lutheran. I'm making this motion as a starting point. We already have a motion to send this to Synod Council for further study. Looking at staffing, and Bishop Regal enumerated the fact that Synod Council can adjust the budget, spending less than what's budgeted. This is a beginning, folks. Let's move. Let's do something and put our faith into action.
And I just realized something. The question has been called on this. The call was seconded. It was voted to be a vote. We were just getting some information, and so discussion at this point is over. So all those in favor of this this main motion that's already been read, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? No. Motion passes. Now it's open. I know this gentleman's been waiting for a while.
Thank you. I'm Mike Brill of Zion Lutheran Church in Baker. And I'd like to move that the Senate Council approach this problem from both ends. By that I mean, yes, of course, we want to cut unnecessary spending, but I'd like to, for the Senate Council also to, during the year, to look for ways to try to get more money in.
Okay. Is there a second for a motion, this motion? Second. There is a second. Can we get that, can we get that in writing?
There are motion forms.
There's motion forms up there, but he can speak to it at this point first, so I think go ahead and speak to your motion, and then we'll put it in writing. It'll be easier to keep this moving. Okay,
Well,
it's up there already. Go ahead.
We're talking about let's cut this altogether, let's cut that altogether, let's cut this by a certain amount. You can't get ahead by cutting and nothing else. So we should try to look for ways that the Senate could raise money.
So, thank you. And we're talking about this main motion. There's one other person, I think, here to talk.
I'm George McKinney with Trinity Lutheran in Charleston, and I rise to support this motion. I believe that we are overly concerned with a lack of wealth instead of being concerned with a lack of support. Why do we have a lack of funds? We need to look at the elephant in the room. Why are our receipts down? Where do we need to look to increase our mission?
Thank you. Is there anyone else speaking to this motion?
I'd like to call the question.
Question's been called. Is there a second? All those in favor of voting on this motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Okay, let's vote on the motion. The motion is as states, the Senate Council approach this problem from both ends, cut unnecessary spending, and look for ways to get more money in. All those in favor of this motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify the same sign. Motion passes. Bishop Riegel.
Matthew Riegel, Bishop. Reverend Chair, I move the following. To instruct Synod Council in its execution of S-1513 to prioritize for funding the oversight function of the Synod as outlined in the Constitution, bylaws, continuing resolutions of the ELCA in support of word and sacrament, teaching of the faith, and care of souls amongst the congregations in the Synod.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. So feel free to speak to that, Bishop Riegel.
During the break, and as debate has gone on, several folks have come to me and asked where cuts should be made, where they shouldn't be made. I made a point of referencing S-1513 to say that Synod Council has the prerogative of not expending money if we're short on income. They have to spend it if we have the income. But as one person asked me, do we have a list of synodical priorities? And the answer is no, not really. We have our governing documents. We have some past actions. We have a mission statement, but it is rather outdated. And that was not formed by a clear process of setting values for the Synod. If Synod Council is to execute S-1513, I believe it would be helpful if they had some clear advice on what to prioritize for protecting in the budget, leaving other matters open to discretion. This motion would prioritize the oversight function, and this is always a question we have, which is, well, what does Synod do? We have rarely talked about the primary function of Synod under the Constitution and bylaws as the oversight function, which has a great deal to do with ecclesiastical discipline, a great deal to do with the consultation process when congregations are in conflict, has a great deal to make sure that the rules are followed in the life of the church and the confessions remain the theological norm for the church. That is, according to our Constitution, the heart of the function of the Synod. We don't talk about it much. And the next thing that goes with it is synods, in my opinion, exist to support the work of congregations. 98% of all ministry, that's my rough estimate, 98% of all ministry takes place in congregations. It's where the war is fought, in the trenches. Synod can be helpful and useful to fighting that war. We're ecclesia militans, the church at war. The Synod can be useful in that, but the Synod's not the one on the front lines. So our job is, I believe, to support congregations in their exercise of word and sacrament, support congregations in their exercise of the teaching of the faith, support congregations in the care of souls, and the Synod at the same time does those things as well, but not to the extent that congregations, but it is an authentic part of synodical work. Beyond that, I believe Synod Council should exercise its judgment on what's best to reduce and what not best to reduce. If the income does not come in, nothing prevents, after adoption of this budget and the Synod Council's production of the mission support request, nothing prevents any congregation from saying we'd like to give more than the Synod had asked us to give.
Thank you, Matt. Bishop Riegel. Who is up next?
Yeah, that was the
He's working on it right now. No, yep, that's right, that's the motions. Bishop Riegel has a copy. It was seconded. Because he wouldn't have been able to speak unless it was. Now the motion's up. You want me to reread the motion, or do you guys know? Okay. Motion from Bishop Riegel to instruct Senate Council in its execution of Senate Council its execution of S-15.13 to prioritize funding for the oversight function of the Senate as outlined in the CBCR of the ELCA in support of word and sacrament, teaching of the faith, and care of the souls. What?
I have asked a question. If I'm asking people to instruct Synod Council, my motion is that this committee forward to the main body,
yes.
that the Synod Assembly's instruction to Synod Council is to do it this way.
I'll give a little explanation. What is this committee doing? Right now, I don't think, it can be confusing. What's the committee called again, Matt? Committee of the Whole, okay. I have committee of the oversight in my head, so it was kind of a strange thought. But a committee of the whole, what we're doing is we're convened as a committee, we're making suggestions in this committee to send to the Synod Assembly, which when it's sent to the Synod Assembly, and when we close out the committee, Matt becomes chair again, it's sent to the Synod Assembly, and then we have this as one package that the Synod Assembly can talk about again if we want to. But this allows it, but it can be adopted from that point. And so if we were wondering what we're doing, that's what we're doing. Yes?
I have a question. Is this motion in conflict with the previous motion we just passed?
No, it is not. What? Can you clarify seeking instruction on the previous motion? What is S-1513, Matt?
S-1513 is the provision that states, that I read to you earlier.
Okay.
That if there's insufficient funding, Synod Council can make reductions in expenditures.
Because that was the confusion. That's good. You have something?
It's a wonderful addition. I call the question.
Call the question.
Second.
Since all those in favor of voting? Aye. All opposed? All in favor of the amendment? Aye. I have a motion. Any opposed? Passes.
Randolph Richardson, pastor at Trinity Lutheran in Charleston. I would like to move that we close out the committee of the whole and return to the agenda.
Is there a second? Okay, all those in favor of closing out of the committee of the whole and returning to the agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? You're needed up front, man.
The assembly will stand easy for 5 minutes. Stand easy for 5 minutes. I want to get some stuff straightened out up here. Grab some coffee and stuff like that, but by standing easy, we're not in recess, so don't like disappear out the door and stuff, okay? 5 minutes. Chair asks for Pastor Richter to come forward.
Thank you. Just a few things. What we're gonna do is we're gonna read the suggestions of the Committee of the Whole for the Synod Assembly all over again, and we're gonna do this in order. First things first, send to Senate Council the task of office staffing and how it can be reduced in order to reduce costs. Second, in reference to the proposed 2020 budget, the following 5 actions are germane to be considered for the 2020 budget. Unrestricted savings account to be reduced from $43,698 to 0. Mission support for the ELCA to be reduced to 30%. United Lutheran Seminary be reduced from 26,000 to 1,000. The Senate Council be instructed to craft a proposed 2021 budget by imagining this Senate to be a brand new entity with X amount of projected income that does not have to be capped to what it has always been done, proverbially speaking. Put a blank sheet of paper on the table and let your imagination run. Number 5, the Senate Council be instructed to employ, ask for, conscript, and or demand any assistance it deems appropriate so that others may help carry this burden. And also we adjust this budget by deleting giving to ULS $1,000, Teal College 0, Glade Run Lutheran Services 0, maintain support to the campus ministry WVU, the campus ministry Senate Terrace, Camp Luther, Caroline Furnace Lutheran Camp, and Community Lutheran Partners Incorporated. In addition, the third thing we bring forth is that during the year, the Senate Council approached the budget problem from both ends. That during the year, the Senate Council not only look for ways to cut spending, but that the Senate Council also look for ways to bring more money in. And finally, to instruct Senate Council in its execution of S15.13 to prioritize for funding to oversight function of the Senate outlined in the CBCR of ELCA, and also support of Word and Sacrament, teaching of the faith, and care of the souls. And I move that we accept this as assembly en bloc.
Second.
Thank you. No, I didn't need it, but thank you, Pastor Holbert, for your enthusiasm. So, the Committee of the Whole has reported. You have heard the whole series of recommendations coming out of Committee of the Whole. The proposal is to adopt them en bloc, which means a single vote would handle the entire thing. You have the prerogative to debate this. You have the prerogative to attempt to amend any provision. You may also ask for something called division of the question, by which you can, however you want, split these apart so that they are handled separately or in different configurations rather than as a whole. Those are some of your options. Yes, sir. Chair recognizes Chaplain Sedley.
Question. Does this en bloc motion also include then approving it with the entire budget? Or is this just an amendment to the budget and then we'd have to approve the entire budget in another motion?
That is correct. These would make all those amendments to the budget, and then we would still have to vote on the budget as an act.
So I would make an amendment that the en bloc motion would also include approval of the 2020 budget with these en bloc amendments, or with these en bloc motion.
Okay, so Chaplain Sedley, Chaplain Sedley to Lutheran Campus Ministry, for the record, has recommended amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole to include in the actions the adoption of the budget as proposed, as the amendments proposed in the report of the Committee of the Whole. Does that capture it? And I have a second to that. Chaplain Sedley, you may speak to it.
It saves us a step.
Chair recognizes Pastor Richardson.
Randolph Richardson, Trinity Lutheran, Charleston. I move the question.
We have a previous question has been moved. Do I have a second on previous question? I have a second on previous question. Non-debatable. All in favor of previous question, which would close debate and then move us to a vote on the report of the Committee of the Whole. All in favor of closing debate and moving to that, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
Point of order, wasn't that on, weren't we voting on, Pastor Sethley's amendment?
We had already adopted his amendment. No, we hadn't. I'm sorry. Sorry, my fault. My fault. You get a sticker. Come on up, Christine. Here we go. Robert is most certainly true. All right. Yes, I'm sorry, that was my error. I wasn't jotting things down quickly enough. So the motion to call the question, we're going to have to revote that. The motion to call the question was to close debate on Chaplain Setley's motion to amend to include adoption of the budget. So, all in favor of closing the question on that, on the amendment to adopt the budget, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. We are back now to the whole report of the Committee of the Whole as an en bloc with that amendment. That is now open to debate. Oh, I'm sorry. Jeez, I just want to, I'm so tired. I'm so tired. So now the vote is on to adopt Chaplain Setley's proposed amendment to the Committee of the Whole to adopt the budget.
Yeah, give yourself a sticker, Bishop.
Oh my God. So, hey, stop. Here's where we are. We have just voted to close debate on Chaplain Setley's motion to amend the report of the Committee of Whole to include adoption of the budget. We must now vote on whether we're going to actually amend it, correct? Correct. All in favor of amending the report of the Committee of Whole to include adoption of the budget signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. No. The report of the Committee of the Whole has been amended. Debate is now on the report of the Committee of the Whole as amended. Pastor Richardson.
Randolph Richardson, Trinity Lutheran. I would like to call the question. And after it is seconded and before we vote, I'd like to ask my esteemed colleague to offer a prayer.
Very good. The motion is to call the question on the report of the Committee of the Whole. All in favor of closing debate signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. We will move to now vote on the report of the Committee of the Whole after Pastor Muley has offered prayer.
The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
O gracious God, you have moved mightily among us for many years. Before the creation of this synod, you moved in our congregations, in our forefathers and foremothers. You gave them vision and courage and optimism and faith in the future that they trusted you would lead them toward. And so now, this day, we pray for that same sweet spirit to fall among us, that as we have discussed and wrestled and been frustrated and grown tired, that indeed your spirit of unity would be among us, that even as we may have difference of opinion, that we remember together that the proclamation of the gospel is why we gather, that you would give us discernment as we go forward, that you would give guidance to all those who serve on Synod Council, in our congregations, in leadership, and that in all things that we would remember that we are called to be your church in this time and place and to trust you as we go forward. Be with us, be in the midst of our decision making, and gather us together in love. For Jesus' sake.
Amen. You have heard the report of the Committee of the Whole. It is normally necessary that I state the question, which would be to read the entire report to you again. Is there any objection to dispense with reading of the report and considering the question stated? Hearing no objection. All in favor of adopting the report of the Committee of the Whole as Pastor Day?
Point of inquiry, can we see the budget now that on the screen or with the cuts?
With the
that are-
changes made?
Yes.
The point of, the point of inquiry, as it is necessary to know exactly what you're voting on, is valid. It will take time, I believe, in order to adjust those numbers, which means that I would have to suspend the voting process at this time, which I don't have a problem doing, and giving the treasurer an opportunity to change all those numbers. But that's where we would be at this point. So if you want to have that, tell me now if you want that or not.
I like that.
Okay. Voting process is suspended because there's been a legitimate,
Parliamentary inquiry.
yes.
Bill Ridenour, First English Wheeling. Can the Assembly move to override what Matt Day wants?
It is the Assembly's prerogative, yes. So the thing is, the chair has made a decision that the point is germane and legitimate, and has decided to postpone. The proper motion now is to dissent from the ruling of the chair. So the question is immediately put then, Pastor Kleiner, if it's helpful.
That's a point of order.
Yes.
We have special orders of the day.
Orders of the day. Orders of the day have been called. It precedes all other requirements at this point.
It's been done in 60 seconds, Jerry.
So, orders of the day having been called. This assembly is therefore adjourned until 1 o'clock this afternoon. Now, okay. Assembly is adjourned to 1 o'clock this afternoon. Now listen to me carefully. 1300 means 1 o'clock. What we go into now is an open hearing of the Ad Hoc Committee on United Lutheran Seminary. So we will no longer be in assembly session, but it will actually be a committee meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee on United Lutheran Seminary. We have guests here from United Lutheran Seminary. There will be a question and answer presentation and more information upon the seminary. So while the assembly is no longer in session, there is this very important committee meeting everyone is invited to attend. So, Pastor Smith, if you want to come forward as you are presiding over this, we are now adjourned till 1 p.m. Is that Smith? Yes. Good, I don't have my glasses.
This is a meeting in an assembly, but not on the agenda of the Ad Hoc Committee that was put together at the request of City Council. Well, it first came out of the 2018 Assembly and then was sent to Synod Council. Synod Council put an Ad Hoc Committee together for inquiries into what began about 2 years ago, the merger of the predecessor bodies of United Lutheran Seminary now, and to inquire, on the progress of that, questions we had, and other things like that. So the committee was put together. ULS actually was proactive in reaching out to us to get together face to face. We eventually were able to do that as a committee. Those on the committee are current and former board members of the predecessor bodies, and also sitting on that were 2 members of the Joint Candidacy Committee. So what was decided on when we had our face-to-face meeting in February was that we would present questions and inquiries, concerns, and pre-written questions that came out of that meeting, and that also facilitated some other questions we had, and present those to ULS, so ULS could then come with the representatives with answers to those questions. So we're going to go through the questions now. Matt's getting ready to pull them up on the screen so you can see the questions that the Ad Hoc Committee submitted, and we are grateful and we welcome Andrea Oslikova.
My name is Andrea Oslikova. It's so great to be with you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a hard one. It's all right, Pastor Smith.
And what you do with ULS is?
I work in the advancement office, specializing as a major gift officer. So I would love to take any of you out to lunch if you're interested, and also focus with congregational relationships and alumni.
And Dr. Ebner?
Vince Ebner, Assistant Professor of Lutheran Reformation Studies and Director of the Lutheran College.
So the format for this, as I said, were questions that reflect our concerns as an Ad Hoc Committee and what we had heard coming out of last year's Synod Assembly. And the structure is they fall under academics, financial, and policy. So we want to allow time for ULS to address these. So the format will be preset questions with the answers that they have brought. Afterwards, should we have enough time, we'd like to allow time for Andrea and Vince to speak about anything that maybe is not on here that they would like to share with the Synod about ULS. So I think the best way to do this is I will read the questions and we'll just go through them and allow you guys to come up to the podium and answer. So the first question under academics, the West Virginia, Western Maryland Synod and Southwest Penn Candidacy Committee has experienced the problem of seminary students not being able to articulate the theological understanding of Lutheranism. We have heard similar concerns from other candidacy committees. We understand that this is not just a ULS problem. What role does Lutheran confessional, Lutheran scholastic, and Lutheran pietistic theologies play in the education of ULS students?
Thank you for the question, and I'm glad to be here. I'll do my best with this microphone. Yeah, we're actually going to redirect. Now, we are going to answer the question. I think it's most helpful to start with number 3, and I, if you don't mind, I'll just read it for you. Because in answer to number 3, the question is, what courses are we offering that cover Lutheranism? By talking about that, I'll be able to better address the question of how we're dealing with these distinct strands of Lutheran tradition. Yes, so question 3, under the course description, denominational polity, does Lutheran Foundations include Lutheran confessions and Reformation history? Is Lutheran Foundations the only specifically Lutheran course taught at ULS? And the rest of the curriculum designed to be ecumenical? And the answer is, so the first question is easy, foundations. What we call foundations, that's Lutheran confessions, has a shiny new name. It's the same thing. That is not the same thing as Reformation history. There is a course in Reformation history and theology that is offered. That will be up next spring. So those are 2 distinct things. There are quite a few distinctly Lutheran offerings in the curriculum. So my colleague, Dr. Erling, teaches history of Lutheranism. John Hoffmeyer teaches contemporary Lutheran theology. We have Paul Razashekar from Philadelphia, who is an expert in global Lutheran theology, interpreting Lutheran theology in global context. So he teaches a number of courses that are relevant. Angela Zinman does teaching for us, and she is teaching a Preaching with Luther course in the J term. We're excited also that we have a new hire for worship and liturgy, Kyle Schiefelbein from Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary. He's someone who's deeply immersed in Lutheran traditions of liturgy and worship, and will be bringing that to the table. I myself, in addition to teaching confessions and Reformation and early church and medieval church, teach a number of electives that try to situate, for example, on mysticism and spirituality, that try to situate Lutheranism in the broader Christian tradition as a way of creating understanding of what Lutheranism is all about. You don't know what Lutheranism is all about if you don't know what the other options are. So a student who started in the MDiv program, say this coming fall, would be able to have, in addition to confessions, Reformation history, history of Lutheranism, post-Reformation, global Lutheran theology, or modern Lutheran theology in global context, preaching with Luther, worship and liturgy from a Lutheran perspective, Coming up, I think it will be in 2020, I'll be teaching a Readings with Luther elective, which I'm very excited about. So a focused Luther course dealing with different theological issues. A lot of Luther. The thing is, we need students to take these courses, to avail themselves of the courses. So ULS allows flexibility. It allows flexibility, which is a good thing. It means that the Synod can sit down with its candidates and say, this is what you need. We would like to see you improve in this area. And the student has the opportunity to do that. But it does mean that students have to intentionally choose to take the Lutheran courses. So for instance, Church History 1, well, take Church History 2, easier example, can be fulfilled with multiple different courses. There's a course on globalizing Christianity, and there's history of Lutheranism. You can take both, or you can just take one. So the students who need a Lutheran immersion need to take the Lutheran course. It's the same way, Church History 1 moving forward, you can fulfill with the church a course that's on the creeds and the medieval tradition, or a course that's on the Lutheran Reformation. Ideally, students will take both. Students should take both. They're both awesome. But again, it's a place where ELCA students need to be encouraged, directed, coerced, however you want to do it, to take the Lutheran courses. And this is a place where I think a partnership would be really helpful. So the Synod can partner with the seminary, can come up and look at the courses that we were offering over a 4-year period, come up with a recommended list, and have your candidates take those courses so that they are getting the deep Lutheran formation that is available at ULS. So I think this is an area where moving forward we can work very effectively together and have a curriculum that allows the flexibility that today's candidates need, and also have a curriculum that gives the Lutheran candidates, the vast majority of our students, the immersion in Lutheranism they need. So that was a long answer. I told you I would be long-winded. I have a few students in the audience. They all know they should go out to lunch right now.
I think maybe taking your cue on combining those two, maybe look at question 4 and 5 and answering that on patristics and biblical language.
Patristics. Well, let me do biblical language because it's easier. See, I keep changing the order. Students can tell you I'm difficult. So number 5, where do languages fit into the MDiv curriculum? Are they still required? If it will be entirely through translation tools and thus integrated into the Bible curriculum, please state such. If not, please explain. Greek is required, and Hebrew is optional at this point. I should say, we just had a search for our new Old Testament professor. One question every professor was asked was, how will you inspire and encourage students to take Hebrew? That reflects the fact that Dr. Schramm's Hebrew course was very successful and very popular, and students wanted to take that. And we want that to continue to be the case moving forward. There is an emphasis on practical tools. There is an emphasis on practical tools, on using software, so that students who aren't going to become fluent in Greek are still able to reference the Greek and have that inform their sermons. The professors in these classes are trying to deal with people who have a great facility and enthusiasm for language and people who don't. I get the latter, right? I hated language study. Right, so we're trying to deal with that. Students who want a deeper immersion and more language study do, as part of ULS, are able to take advantage of the Washington Theological Consortium and are able to go and get a deeper immersion in Greek to really become fluent, or really become fluent in Hebrew, or even to pursue another language, depending on what context of ministry they're in. They can go to the consortium for that, and that's a great resource. Because as, I don't know whether you want to call us a mid-sized seminary or a small seminary, but as a seminary with a small faculty, there's only so much we're able to offer, right? We want our Bible professors teaching intro to New Testament and Old Testament and so forth. I should also say here, for those interested in German, we do have a scholarship available for students who are interested, who know German and are interested in studies in Germany. That's an aside. Question 4, patristics. Where do patristics fit into the MDiv curriculum?
Could you explain to some of the members what patristics is?
Yes. Patristics is a terminology that is used for the early church fathers. So from the Latin pater, meaning father, patristics is the study of the church fathers. Sometimes you now hear the term matristics as well, so patristics or amatristics. Patristics fit in the curriculum in a number of places. I should say, I'll speak mostly about what I do. My colleague John Hoffmeyer, systematic theologian, he's responsible for teaching our Intro to Systematic Theology course, has said that he often uses patristic authors in there because he wants to see the students, to see that, you know, it's not just the modern theology that's good. It's not just the modern theology that gets you to the gospel, right? Sometimes students come in with this bias that the old stuff is old and backwards and stodgy and doesn't apply in our context. He wants to push back against that, which I do as well. I teach a version of Church History 1 that is focused on the creeds and the Christian traditions, and the students get the patristics ad nauseum. I gave you the list. Should I give you the list? We start with Irenaeus, 2nd century. We move through the major controversies over the Trinity and over the Incarnation. We study the major ecumenical councils, first 7 ecumenical councils. Students read figures such as Athanasius, Basil, Leo the Great, and others. They read Nestorius, they read Cyril of Alexandria. If you don't know who these are, that's okay. They read a lot of patristic authors. We also in this course address aspects of early Christian spirituality, particularly the spirituality of opposition to the world. And in that light, we read Gregory the Great's Pastoral Rule. We read the Rule of St. Benedict. We look at the history of monasticism. And then I can see there's a strong interest in Augustine embedded in this question, which I share. That allows us to talk about how Augustine then comes into this situation and is able to preserve the radical traditions of the church, but also envision the church as a big tent, which leads to great discussion of, well, what is the church today? So we're able to bring in Augustine there. And then I move forward to the Middle Ages. I look at Anselm, his argument for the Incarnation. We look at Aquinas, scholasticism, mysticism, and so forth. So for Augustine in particular, students leave knowing what the city of God is. I generally have them read parts of the Confessions. Each year my heart breaks when I say raise your hand if you've read Augustine's Confessions, and not a lot of hands go up. We remedy that. So I have them read the Confessions, a lot of anti-Pelagian writings on the Spirit and the Letter, Grace and Free Choice, Rebuke and Grace. We always introduce City of God. I have another course, one of these courses where I try to situate Lutheranism in the tradition, dealing with issues of marriage, family, clerical celibacy, monasticism. How did Lutheranism engage all those issues? Augustine has a central place in that course. We read his treatises on the good of marriage, on holy virginity. We read his treatise on divorce. When you're in Confessions, I always focus on setting Lutheranism in that long tradition. Most lectures start with Augustine, because that's the tradition we're engaging. So again, there's a deep immersion in this patristic tradition, deep thinking about how Lutheranism interacts with it. I've been accused, fairly, with total fairness, of referencing Augustine in every lecture. I usually do accomplish that end. I also have once been awarded by the students an Augustine cake at the end of a course, because I use cake in order to illustrate Augustine's position on the bondage of the will, and we can go into that. But so there's quite a bit of Augustine, quite a bit of patristics in that course. Again, it's a matter of where students have choices in the courses, and again, a matter where people like me, I think these courses are very, very important for the students' formation and for helping them think about what it means to be shaped by the tradition and shaped by the Lutheran tradition. So it's important moving forward to work together to ensure the ELCA students are taking the courses they need. Does that cover it all?
Yeah, no, that's good. I think question number 2 under academics, that ULS has different tracks to ordination. And it's a changing face with accreditation and other issues going on, not just at ULS, but in higher education. But the question that we put forth is ULS has course requirements for an MDiv program. Are they the same requirements for the MDiv, Master of Divinity, DL, distance learning, and also the accelerated Masters of Divinity co-op programs? And I think maybe just a brief answer on that so we get time to do finance and polity.
If you're sick of hearing me talk, once the academics section is over and it goes to the financial, I'm out. I'm not. They told me say nothing about numbers. It's not my vocation. First of all, yeah, they're the same requirements. It's the same degree. They have the same requirements. You go through different paths to get there. The accelerated co-op is a small program because it's very rigorous to be in a parish and studying at the same time. You're basically doing your internship and your studies at the same time. I just want to address quickly, I sense anxiety about the distance learning program in this question. I would underline 2 things. First of all, distance learning, it's not online learning. It's distance learning, and it's called distance learning for a particular reason. Not all the classes are online. Students are required to take 1/3 of their classes on campus. The ideal is that in August of your first year, you will come to campus and take Systematic Theology 1. So that allows a group of online students, say we're going to have 20 students in the online program, well, see, there I go, in the distance learning program. We're going to have 20 students, they're together on campus, they get to know each other, they form relationships. They also form relationships with the residential students. There's an opportunity for a cohort to come together. I should say that the skepticism about online teaching can work very, very, very effectively. One of the things that a good online course requires is for a student to participate in a discussion board each week. You cannot hide when you have to write your answer. You can't sit in the back of the room and, answer the easy question and then be done. You've really got to have done the reading, thought about the reading, and I can say that very deep and meaningful conversations occur over those discussion boards. The students get to know each other very well, and so I've seen it work. I've seen it work very, very well. We have coming into ULS younger faculty who are going to be doing online teaching right away. Most of those that we have been hired have online experience. And that's just really helpful for making sure the online format is as rich and engaging as it can be. And now I'll shut up.
What's left, we'll try and split those equally if able to, is just to allow Andrea to go through the questions without me getting them interrupted. And also, just wanted to point out that the reason we had different sections is we realized that when it came to finance questions and polity questions, when we had our face-to-face meeting with folks from ULS, it was with interim president Dr. Green, there's a limited availability of those folks to go around to all the Synod assemblies. So I want to thank Andrea as head of advancement for processing through this. I don't think it's entirely fair to expect you to have all of this, but I'm glad that you are here, and I will let you go through the finance questions, and then I'll get back up.
Thank you all so much, and thank you so much for that introduction. I'd love to pretend that I am the head of advancement, and maybe someday, but that job does go to my boss, Dr. Angela Zinman, who I am very happy to be representing today. I'm just going to read these questions out, and then in a different voice, do my answer, okay? Just kidding, I'm not going to do that. All right, question 1. Although the West Virginia Western Maryland Synod has always met or exceeded the now defunct basic synodical support request, we realize the nominal figure is rather small when compared to larger synods. In the years surrounding the merger of ULS and its predecessor bodies, our desire to engage, support, and inquire into the process were met with indifference. How does ULS look at support from synods, and particularly from this synod? Okay, now I'm going to answer. I am happy to report that we have enjoyed a full, stable year under intentional interim leadership. President Green created a full-time position specifically around this problem, making sure that we are creating and engaging in relationships with our synodical leaders, and especially, most especially, with our congregations. I am also happy to report that we do enjoy and very much appreciate many, many healthy and productive relationships with synods all over Region 7 and 8. Okay? All right, question 2. What is the short-term 1 to 5 year financial outlook for ULS? Oh my gosh, that's great. I'm just going to do these by the bullets. A, are expenses still exceeding income each quarter? Yes. Is ULS still paying? Did somebody turn my thing on? It's really loud. Is ULS still paying $300,000 a year to carry the Seminary Ridge Museum? No. How long does ULS anticipate paying free tuition? The answer here is indefinitely. Free tuition is a part of our policy and a commitment to the life and future of the Lutheran Church, and it's made fiscally possible by a $35 million bequest that is restricted for student scholarships. D, how will ULS continue to financially maintain and staff 2 campuses, Philadelphia and Gettysburg? Is this feasible in the short term and long term? It is our short-term reality and a major focus of the Strategic Planning Committee for moving forward. We are committed to achieving long-term financial sustainability. That is our ultimate goal. Everybody still with me? All right, great. Number 3, how will ULS be financially and academically ready for the accreditation in 2020, the accreditation process? I would encourage each of you concerned with this question to I'm encouraging and directing you to the updates that are offered on our webpage to see real-time efforts and engagements occurring now around that accreditation process. Those things have already begun on campus. We have the committed experience of Dr. John Hoffmeyer and Dr. Storm Swain serving as accreditation liaison and accreditation officer. We are on an established timeline and in a period of self-study right now, which is really serving many different parts of our strategic goals. We are all on schedule for that, and based on our audits and projections, everything is in line for that accreditation process. This is the part where if I was a teacher, I would invite questions. Any questions around any of the things that might have been unclear? Question? Oh, sorry.
I just want to clarify, the accreditation is going through ATS, that's...
Indeed.
Okay. Could you...
Middle States.
Just for those
governing body of, it's the Association for Theological, Association of Theological Schools. And it basically comes in to make sure that we are in line to be able to deliver degree programs. It also makes us eligible for grants and other types of funding from different sources. Is that okay? Great. Thank you.
Moving on to the policy questions. The first question was really a lot of discussion was had about this and concerns when it comes to rural and small church ministry. And the Town and Country Church Institute, which was part of the Gettysburg Synod predecessor body, and is still a part of ULS. But that was a lot of discussion in our last face-to-face did center around this issue in particular. So I will allow you again.
Yeah, well,
you were up, and I would say just walk through the questions for about 10 minutes.
So, well, we were thinking we're going to go back and forth on policy, but we'll get through it. So the question about the Town and Country Church Institute, and what's going on. I'm not really reporting for myself. I'm reporting for Dr. Gil Walkenig, who sent me a long answer, and if I read that, you wouldn't get to eat ever. So I will give you the summary. He wants me to convey that the Town and Country Church Institute is in fact flourishing, most encouraging. His enrollment in his rural and small church ministry course has been up significantly since the merger. So we're seeing more students participating in that. A course in Appalachian Church in Society has now also been added to the mix, and there is strong enrollment there as well. Students in those courses have done field work, including in numerous sites in West Virginia, Maryland Synod, and I can give you the list if you want it during break. The Town and Country Church Institute has obtained significant grant money to support this field work by students. There is a commitment on the part of Town and Country Church Institute and ULS to ministry in this region, and that is reflected in our growing partnership with Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, something that Gil has stewarded. His course in rural and small church this fall will be offered both as a residential course in Gettysburg and as a DL course that is cross-listed with Pittsburgh Theological Seminary. So that's a strong partnership for us. We are also about to launch a Doctor of Ministry in rural church, which is expected to launch this summer. And those students who come into that DMIN program are going to be eligible for scholarship money to cover their studies, to cover their coursework. There is an endowed chair associated with the Town and Country Church Institute. So there is a secure, permanent presence of the Institute and of a professor directing it at ULS. President Green has been strongly supportive of the program. The dean is supportive of the program. And there's strong support from our Philadelphia colleagues. If there's a concern here that there's a rural-urban competition, Town and Country Church Institute versus Urban Theological Institute, we don't really see things that way. We think having both sites is a strength of the seminary. It's a big strength of the seminary. It means students can come in and be exposed to diverse contexts and think about where they are called to serve. That is a big strength of the seminary. And even once they've figured out where they're called to serve, as it's that simple, they're aware of why ministry in that context is distinct from ministry in other contexts. That is a great strength for the students' formation. All right, any questions?
Okay, the next policy question. What is the expectation of ULS for its internship placement and programming going forward after Pastor Knapp's resignation? How might Bound Conscience Position 1 and 2 play into the potential placements of LGBTQIA candidates? We will be, obviously, replacing Pastor Knapp as soon as possible. His role is critical. The role of contextual formation is very important to any person's spiritual and leadership development. Understanding the vital nature of this position for the life and health of the seminary and its students is of course paramount. ULS is a seminary committed to being a welcoming seminary for all students. The question of bound conscience is probably one left to the leadership of your synod.
You're helping me look long-winded by answering briefly. What does ULS believe the primary tasks of parish ministry to be, and how does ULS teach to implement that approach in its students? The primary task of ministry is the proclamation of the gospel of Jesus Christ, to console consciences and magnify Christ, as the confessions state. I don't need to tell you that there are a lot of, what shall we say, subtasks involved in that. Preaching, teaching, leading worship, helping people identify their own calls in the church and in the world, reaching out beyond the walls of the church. There's a lot that comes with proclaiming the gospel in word and deed, but that's what we're trying to equip our students to do. Our curriculum is designed to equip students with historical and theological depth, to equip them with knowledge of the Bible and appropriate hermeneutics, and to equip them with practical skills for ministry. And of course, our curriculum is broken down into history and theology, Bible, and practice. Those are our three areas. It's a very traditional division. Students have to take 6 courses in each of the 3 areas, and then they have 6 electives, which they can take in any area. Again, this is where I'm saying there is flexibility, and students have to think about the formation they need. In general, what we want is depth. Is depth and ability to use it in context. And our students get that. They tell me that they hear the word context all the time, right? Well, there's nothing more Lutheran than having the gospel, holding word and sacrament at the center, and thinking about how to make that speak in distinct contexts. And that's what we want students to be able to do. We want to equip them to be people who can continue to learn and who can continue to develop. So that means having basic ideas. That means having fundamental ideas, having necessary skills, knowing where to look for answers, having an attitude of, I'm going to both allow myself to be continually shaped by studying scripture and studying tradition, and I'm going to continually be engaged with the people around me to be discerning my context. So we want people to have those skills, those attitudes, that knowledge that is needed to continue to develop in ministry.
All right, last question. Why should our students matriculate at ULS as opposed to another ELCA seminary or a university-based divinity school besides free tuition? I really appreciate the question, and I understand why you're asking us to look beyond free tuition. But I do want to say that tuition is very important. Free tuition is something United Lutheran Seminary has worked hard to implement as a means to encourage more people to answer their call to ministry. It is a sign and an investment in the kingdom of God. We believe that by allowing new seminarians to graduate with little or no debt from seminary, they are much better equipped to begin their ministries in every type of parish. Besides this commitment to future church leaders, other reasons to consider attendance at ULS include a dynamic and experienced faculty, which you have seen today, you have witnessed today, a diverse student body, urban and rural ministry settings, and a theologically rooted Lutheran identity and ecumenical partners. Thank you.
I want to thank both of you for engaging us in a more in-depth look at our relationship with ULS and what ULS is doing. So, and also answering concerns that the committee put together. So thank you. If it's okay with you both, I would encourage folks, if this spurred more questions, or if you want to talk more, that you'll be available during lunchtime. You're not headed back right away? Yeah, so feel free to engage in some more at lunchtime if you'd like. With that said, I will adjourn the meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee at this time, and also ask for a brief meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee as we head off to lunch in the back, just to touch base before we do our final report on the committee, because the committee's job was to do what we've just done and report back to 2019 Synod Assembly, and that ends our task. So if we could just meet briefly, those who are the Ad Hoc Committee are here. I will end this, and do you want me to invite people to lunch, or Bishop? We can now break for lunch with
Instructions. Lunch, do you want to give the instructions, Nancy, on lunch? Okay, tell us where we're supposed to go.
Hey, lunch is out in this lounge area. There are 2 identical lines. You can go down both sides of both lines. Okay, there are 2 different kinds of soup, 3 different kinds of salads, and about 4 different kinds of warm hoagies. Okay, and your drinks are in here. There's also fruit left from this morning's break. It's out there for you to continue to enjoy.
Be thy children, God most holy, comfort sinners poor and lowly. Hold the bread of life from heaven, bless this food thou here hast given. As these gifts our bodies nourish, may our souls in graces flourish, till with saints in heavenly splendor, at thy feast to thanks we render.
Lord God, Heavenly Father, bless us and these thy gifts, which we receive from thy bountiful goodness. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.